Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Inside Out Engineering Podcast, where we talk about all things emotional intelligence for the technical mind. And today we are joined by one of my favorite sales leaders. And yes, for all my engineers out there, I know you're thinking, Nikki, are you serious? Engineering and sales? Come on. And yeah, I am. So I need you guys to hear me out on this one. Allie is a seasoned advocate for the internal first growth mindset with a career spanning from the high growth corporate world to the hands on world of startups and entrepreneurship. Allie understands that whether you're scaling an enterprise team or building a boutique brand, the relationships behind the scenes are what drive the results to the dashboards. So, y'all, she cares about us as engineers, and we're going to talk a lot about it. She is a leader who truly believes that the customer is always right mantra should not come at the expense of your engineering and ops teams. And she's navigated the evolution of client service since the 90s, and she has seen how relationship debt can sink even the best products. She's currently looking to build her next leadership challenge and is here to help us solve the friction between what the client wants and what the team can actually build. So, y'all, buckle up. It's gonna be good, I promise. And for every sales leader out there, please take some notes. And for every engineer out there, I promise you it's worth a listen. Well, hello, Allie. Thank you so much for joining me on the Inside Out Engineering Podcast.
Hey, Nikki, happy to be here.
My gosh, I'm so excited to talk to you for an infinite number of reasons. But I want to start by letting everyone get to know you and asking my favorite question. What is your origin story? What did you study? What are you doing with it now?
Yeah, so my undergraduate was in psychology and with an art minor. So I do photography on the side. I'm very creative. So that was my outlet. I just couldn't figure out how I was going to monetize that. And I found the pressures of being told you had to do an assignment on a deadline just kind of quelched the creative juices. I then went on for my master's in psychology. Did a lot of practicums working within the community. And I decided during that time that there was a component of psychology that I loved in terms of understanding people
Hmm.
and building better relationships and rapport and understanding the people around me. But the clinical practice was just extremely heavy for me. So I was taking that home with me. And
Mm.
before I even finished the first master's, I already enrolled in my MBA.
Wow.
So
Dual
2
masters.
masters. Yes.
Wow. Not chill at all. That's amazing.
I love learning. So it wasn't a problem and I just did it all in a row. I'd continue to go back to school if I had infinite amounts of money to learn lots of things. So
I know, I know. And I feel like that like roll from just school into more school into more school is really helpful because when you're in school, you have to learn a certain way, right? You have to structure your time in a certain way. And then when you get into the corporate world, your time takes on new meanings and how you structure your day is a little bit different. Um, but I will say, I noticed a huge difference as I've gotten older because I struggled in school. It was not my favorite thing, similar to like your comment about how um, the idea of doing something on a deadline kind of squelches creativity. I very much felt the same way with just like anything I was doing, whether it like, because no one really talks about engineering being creative, but I personally think it's a very deeply creative discipline. And the idea that like I'm on a deadline just and from psychology, right? It inherently like puts blinders on your brain. So you're not really thinking of things as organically as you probably would if you had infinite time and could let things flow. But so school was definitely a little bit more challenging for me in my undergraduate degree. But as I've gotten older, it's way more fun to learn things because I want to learn them versus like I have to learn them.
and we're in such an age where pretty much you can just satisfy any curiosity you have, which I love. So
This is true. This is true. Like it is really easy for you to learn a new skill without having to go to school. And I know that like master's degrees are so valuable and so important, but there's so much that you can gain from experience. So I want to talk about your experiences because I know that like you again, you went school, 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 but then you went into the workforce. So how did you take these 3 incredible degrees and put them into practice?
Yeah. So when I took an internship with Merrill Lynch, and that was during the first master's when I was still studying psychology. And at first, it was more like, ooh, a graduate level internship that pays this massive hourly rate. At least that's what I felt when I was a student. That sounds great. I'll do that. And I learned a lot about the applications of market research, to studying sort of groups and behaviors as a whole. And I found that intriguing, right? It struck a match. I'm very analytical too. So I'm this weird blend of analytical and creative. And it allowed me to sort of do some test and learn type things. But then also have that human element and figure out how to get people to respond.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's what attracted me to I thought, I'm just going to go right into my MBA. I'm in school. I'm in that mode. I want to learn. I want to be marketable within that industry. Um, but what I started to realize in order to get anything done was that there's this huge contingency about, how the quality of your relationships with the people around you.
Yes, say more, say more.
Right. So I started to really focus on at first just building rapport with other people within my team, within my departments, outside departments, and realized how much more I could learn from them.
Mhm,
And that approach came naturally to me with my customers as well too. I started off more in account management.
mhm,
So taking accounts and just making sure that they were operationally sound. It was less on the sales end.
mhm,
And I had this knack for turning relationships around.
mm,
So they would kind of assign to me, they'd say, Allie, this customer is really difficult. So and so can't, get them to respond. They're very closed door. They're not willing to expand. We don't think they're going to
mm,
renew. Go see what you can do there. And I remember we had this really difficult customer. I was living in New Jersey at the time.
mhm.
They were right outside the airport. It was like this massive commute, which I wasn't happy about. But they agreed to let me sit in their office 2 days a week.
Wow.
And so this really difficult buyer, I got a little cubicle right outside his office, and I went there and I worked 2 days a week. And I would just like at first I would just get like the little bit like when he was coming out the door, and I would just kind of show him something. And eventually I got him to like I could take him to lunch.
Wow.
And it was within a year, he was handing out vendor of the year award to my company.
Wow.
So so that was kind of where this all began, and I started to realize, hey, if I foster my internal relationships, I can get a lot more done.
Mhm,
I can focus on the customer relationships too, and then I can feed this like information back and forth between
mhm,
both sides, like who I'm working for and what I'm trying to get done, what the
mhm.
customer needs to get done, and find this like magic in the middle. So
Yeah,
that was sort of the like how I was sort of born into the business world and sort of found my knack.
yeah. Oh, what a powerful story. I have so many questions, and there's just so many cool ways I just want to unpack this. Like, one, I really want to start on that foundation of the quality of your life depends on the quality of relationships. And if you, and I love your point specifically about investing in your internal relationships, and it feels, and especially somebody like coming fresh out of school, it's so sometimes counterintuitive to go and constantly ask people questions and just focus on building relationships with them, because when we come out of school, we typically think, oh, I have to prove that I'm worth being here. I have to prove my value. So I have to perform for you and get things done. But after a while, you realize I can't get things done unless I learn how to work with other people, because I'm not in a silo. I'm not by myself. I simply cannot think of a job, maybe call centers, where you are actually just sitting by yourself and doing your specific job. So I love that that was something that you were just inherently like, I'm going to start from scratch, start at the ground level and build those relationships. Was it like your psychology background that really taught you that? Or was this something that you were just like, no, I'm just so interested in humans. I want to get to know them?
I think it's just something that is inherent in me. Connection's really important to me. So I think it's something that is sort of almost just my way of doing things. And then it translates into this ability to be able to get more done, right? Just because I care what's happening on the other side. I just I think a lot of people have asked me how I've been successful in creating those relationships, forging those relationships, but it's almost like it's too inherent in me to even understand that that is a skill sometimes. And it took me a long time to realize that there is an approach that's necessary. And I've made it a point to try to share that.
Okay, I want to talk about that. What is the approach? Because I'm very similar to you. Like it I could make friends with trees. Like I have always been that person that goes out and talks to strangers. Like my parents were quite concerned about stranger danger for me because I I'm simply not afraid of strangers. Like I will talk to anyone and everyone. Sometimes, to my parents' detriment. Their biggest fear is I'm just going to walk off with a stranger. And I did all the time. It was a problem.
Believe it.
Um
Just knowing you.
yeah, but, like, at the same time, it is what's made me successful in my corporate jobs because I'm the same way. I am going to spend 80-90% of my time building a relationship with someone over focusing on the nitty-gritty details of my job because I'm not gonna be able to do any aspect of my job successfully if I don't care and I don't know about the people that I'm working with and what they care about. Because
Yes.
if I'm, like, heads down, I might think I'm doing something that's valuable for you, but if I didn't ask you a question or didn't get to know about what you do or why it matters, I could be quite literally running in the wrong direction.
Right. Yeah, and I think, what happens is when we have that sort of genuine curiosity and connection with other people, it breaks down walls, right? Because we can't really know what's important to them if we're just sort of operating in this kind of cold, non-genuine way. And I think we all have a lot of times different departments have different goals in terms of what they're set out to do. And it's just a lack of understanding. So the more we understand each other as a human at the core, the
Yeah.
more progress we're going to make in what we're trying to get done as a business.
I completely agree with you, and I also really love the approach that you took, and and I know this is my word for it, but it was to me consistency. The fact that you were there. You showed this buyer exactly who you were, exactly what like where to find you. You were always there, you were always engaged. It really was. It's I don't want to say it's like a numbers game, but like it really is. Like it's you showing somebody consistently who you are and what you value and that they matter to you even if they're not paying attention to you, right?
Right.
It's not about like them engaging with you. It's you showing them, "Hey, I'm gonna be here. You need
Yeah.
me? I'm here. You have a question? I'm here. Let me show you this thing. I'm right here." And I think that again is another great way to build relationships with people because sometimes, like, and especially with just friendships in general, it's really hard to be friends with someone you only get to see or talk to once a year. That's
Right.
hard to build a relationship.
Yeah. And I think we also, it's not just when you're getting ignored. It can even be behavior that you maybe wouldn't tolerate in your personal life, right? Maybe they're even aggressively unhappy to see you, right? But if you can just be consistent and be kind
Mhm.
and just you can earn pretty much anyone's trust regardless of where their starting position is. And often it has nothing to do with you.
Yeah. Oh, that's so true. I've I've run into this not a lot, but enough to be noteworthy that to believe it or not, to the point where, like, my best friend actually warns people about me before they meet me because she literally says, like, "Nikki, your joy comes with a disclaimer." Like, I have to tell people, "This is genuinely who you are, and this is not an act," because most people are like, "How is it possible for you to be this joyful, to be this bubbly all of the time?" And for some people, it's hard, right? But I've worked really hard on myself to completely have access and control over my joy so that I get to present this full version of me all of the time. So when I'm building relationships with people, that is another big piece of it is I am consistently Nikki. I'm consistently this version of me. I don't care if you're the CEO or the janitor. You are going to get the same version of me. And I don't code switch like a lot of people feel they have to do. And I think it's another great way to build trust with people is show them who you are consistently.
Couldn't
So
agree more.
thank you. So tell me more about this framework for you. How did you develop it? How did you kind of reverse engineer your ability to build relationships with people?
Yeah, I've had a lot of good teachers in my life. I think the most important one is I have a son that is neurodivergent, autism spectrum,
Mhm.
very, very smart, extremely process oriented. And it was a pretty rough road. I'm a single mom as well. So I raised my two kids by myself. They're 20
Oh,
and 21 now.
wow.
Didn't have that support of another, partner that was there to advocate. I think raising a child like that, right? There's a lot of expectations from the world in terms of what the average demeanor is like,
Mhm.
what we would get from the average student, and
Mhm.
anybody who's sort of different from that, you
Mhm.
have to advocate for.
Yeah.
But the challenges as a parent, which I learned, is that you at some point you have to step back,
Mm.
because if you can continue to advocate as they get to the point where they should be doing that for themselves,
Mhm.
all you do is just sort of further isolate them from the rest of the world, right? And learning how
Mhm.
to sort of, just assimilate and interact with the people that just do things differently. So I think, my relationship with my son has really taught me that there are so many different ways to communicate. There are so many different ways to think.
Yeah.
And I have really become sort of hyper aware of the people around me and what their superpowers are.
Mhm.
And I work really hard to make sure that those can shine through. And
Mhm.
whether sometimes it's the person doesn't even realize it, you see it in them, and
Mhm.
it could be as direct as saying, "Hey, have you ever thought about, this approach or this role?"
Mhm.
Or, it can be more subtle depending upon their personality, just inviting them into some things that
Yeah.
you're doing or giving them an opportunity to do something. So I think the part that I get most excited about in my current career is the leadership and the opportunity to mentor, to work with teams, to show people where their powers are, and just it's really just kind of letting them see themselves truly in the mirror. So
Yeah.
I've had to learn that as he became a teenager, right? How do
Mhm.
I not over advocate, and
Mhm.
how do I just step out of the way, but also just shine a light on those strengths so that he
Mhm.
gains.
Yeah. Oh, that's so powerful. I mean, there's like infinite ways to take parenting and make it a metaphor for life. I mean, let's let's be fair. And I think when it comes to those of us that are neurodivergent, those of us that are on the autism spectrum, it can feel like we're missing something, and it can feel like we don't pick up on the cues, or we don't understand why people are saying something, but we know that's not what they mean. And I know for me, that was something I really struggled with as a child is I know what you're saying is nice, like the words are nice, but your body language doesn't match what you're saying, your tone doesn't match what you're saying, the context doesn't match what you're saying, and so it quite literally would break my brain, and I would ask very direct questions that would make people uncomfortable because they would say something and, the, like, age-old, Southern phrase of, like, "Oh, bless your heart," and I'm like, "But why? What bless my heart for what? I what do you
Yes.
mean?" And like a neurotypical person's like, don't ask me questions.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna I'm not gonna tell you what I'm really thinking." But
Right.
a neurodivergent person is like, "No, I need you to explain it to me
You exactly. They need to know why.
Yeah. I need to know why you said that because is it something that did I do something wrong? Because that's another big thing for Nikki as a human and a lot of my neurodivergent friends. Like, we want direct feedback. I want to know directly if I'm doing something right or if I'm doing something wrong, and I need to know why it's wrong, right? If it's a social cue that I just don't understand, explain to me why it's a social cue. Explain to me why this is like a traditional socially accepted behavior. Um, and very similar experience for me is that's a lot of how I figured things out for myself, how I developed these skills is I had safe people that I would ask these questions to. I learned the hard way, like, not to ask people directly, and so I had safe people in my life that I would be like, "Hey, she said this, but I know she didn't mean it. I can't tell you why I know she didn't mean it, but I know she didn't mean it."
We could spend an entire hour talking about just this, but I'm going to bring up, have you ever heard of the ladder of inference?
No, tell me all about it.
So that's a concept that we sort of we recognize patterns,
Mm,
and we also frame the way that we see. We have a lens that we see the world in, and take the world in through our past experiences.
mm,
So just like, you might say, an example that I used to actually teach this in leadership. Let's say you've worked really hard to prepare for a presentation. You and I are co-presenting this together. I'm in the meeting and I'm just on my phone. And you're like, in your head, you're like, what the hell? Like she doesn't care about all the hard work I did. She doesn't find it interesting. You're thinking of all these different things through your head. But what
mhm,
you don't know is that my daughter just texted me and she was in a car accident. Right. So it's that's the thing, is that I think sometimes we have to step back and just recognize that it's a natural part of being a human being that we make these assumptions and we put it together, these little clues about what it means, but we don't have all the context.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's just giving people the benefit of the doubt, taking step backs. I've had a lot of experience with that in management. It goes a long way if you just kind of, I remember I had an engineer that I was working with when I was in a consulting firm, brilliant, but it was during COVID, had just had a baby. This person lived in, like, basically a studio apartment with his spouse, the
wow,
new baby. They couldn't go anywhere. They were worried about the baby, catching everything. But every conference call, like, it was just like baby screaming, and you could hear the wife in the background. So I just called him up one day and I was like, how can I help you? Like, can I send you, noise canceling headphones and a mic? Can we work something out where you're the only person that goes into the office space? That way you don't have to worry about, contamination. And the customer was really frustrated because they felt like we couldn't get anything done.
mm,
And that went such a long way. I have such a
yeah,
good rapport with that person still 6 years later.
aw,
He calls to check in. He sends me pictures of his kids, has more than one. So I think you have to, like, take a few steps back to
mhm,
understand people
mhm.
and problem solve. There's a lot of times there's just something in the way that you can't see.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much unseen, and then I love your point about context because we may never get all the context, and we don't always have the right to all the context either, right? Like, that's somebody's
Right.
personal life. If something's going on, that's their right to have a life, you know? It's not for us to determine whether or not their behavior in this moment is inappropriate if this is an emergency and they're dealing with it. Like, I've had situations where I've had to cancel my entire afternoon last minute, and I had big important meetings on the calendar because we had a health emergency. And it's not my story to tell, so I'm just gonna say, "Hey, I've got an emergency, I can't talk."
Right.
And they may get frustrated. That's their right, but you could just say, "That's okay." I could assume positive intent, and that is my favorite thing to
That's
do.
exactly it.
Yeah.
And that's what I've done in my career professionally, in my personal relationships. I always assume positive intent unless there is a long-standing pattern where I should think otherwise. But that takes a lot with me. I'm very trusting. And I think it's important to lead that way with people. Otherwise, the relationships never really get past a point because there's always going to be something that rubs you the wrong way.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to talk more about your work with engineers because I
Mhm.
know that, you're not an engineer, but you do work with a lot of engineers.
I do.
You have a background in sales, and I know that engineering sales relationship is contentious. So how how did you build rapport with your engineers? How did you know that that's so important? Because I know far too many salespeople who just think of engineers as order takers and tools to be used and not whole humans that have lives and have thoughts and opinions.
Right. Yeah. So I guess one thing that I'll make is a distinction between there's a couple different types of salespeople.
Yeah, tell
So
me.
the traditional salesperson that we all think of and are probably used to working with, I would call a hunter,
Okay.
right? Their job is to find new customers. They are often incentivized on just getting the deal done.
Mhm,
Get the check paid, right? I mean, sign the contract and then they move on.
mhm.
It is not uncommon, and we often experience the fact that there is some embellishing that goes on, right? Whatever it takes to get the deal done, right? And we all wind up paying for that. So that's
Mhm.
one type of sales role that the organizations typically have. And I think it attracts naturally a certain type of person that requires people skills as well. But again, I think they're more a victim of the way we incentivize them. The other
Ooh.
type of salespeople that there are, and which category I fall into, are farmers. And we're the type of people who, after the hunter makes the sale and makes all those crazy promises, we take over that relationship.
Mm.
And we are left kind of holding the bag. And there's this big discrepancy between what they think they bought,
Mhm,
the speed of which things are gonna happen,
mhm.
the number of features, the capability, and they also always wind up feeling like I'm paying more than I wanted to because that hunter was so good. Um, so I've been in that situation where I think sitting in that middle ground, I then have to figure out how to preserve that relationship. And I see a lot of people's approach as farmers is to have a contentious relationship with engineering, which is a symptom
Mm.
of the contract that was signed, right? So then the customer has these really big expectations um, because they were led to believe this is the case, whether it be speed, product, features, whatever. And they are just kind of constantly rubbing, like locking horns with engineering because they're like, well,
Yep.
they were promised this.
Yeah.
And it's sort of and that will continue into the relationship, right? Because they always feel like they haven't quite been given everything that they were sold. So they're always going to be kind of asking for favors
Yeah.
of that company. So what winds up happening is a lot of people, they almost become order takers, the customer facing folks.
Mm.
And then they're not asking the questions, they're not challenging the customer because the relationship's already precarious.
Yeah.
And then they go to product, they go to engineering, and they're like, I need X. And a lot of times that's not on the roadmap. It's not the smart way to do it. It's not reasonable. So that's where the friction lies.
Yeah.
Now, what's different about my approach and the way that especially when I'm building teams in that area, is I don't want a short term fix. I want a long term, really sticky relationship.
Mhm.
And you have to kind of face the music in the beginning when that happens. You have to like kind of take the sword, fall on it, accept the fact that, hey, yeah, there's a difference between what you thought was going to happen and what's really happening.
Yeah.
Any deviation between that, there needs to be some kind of negotiation that the voice of engineering is heard in. Because I can't make promises on engineering's behalf.
Yeah.
I don't know what's possible. I don't know
Mhm.
what's reasonable. I also don't know um how to ultimately solve it, right? So where people get into this really dangerous territory is again these order takers, right? They're just like, okay, customer's really pissed off. The CEO is going to be mad if he gets a call, and then I'm putting all this pressure. So then, what kind of relationship is that, right? If I'm just coming to you and asking you to pull off the impossible, and it also as a process oriented person just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So
No.
that's where I think things need to change. And we talked a little bit about the relationships that you need to build with engineering to even be able to get to that point, right? Because if I just come to you every time I need something, there's less likelihood for us to hear each other properly, right? To I don't understand. I'm not going to understand what's important to you.
Yeah. No, that's
So it's
totally
it's
true.
about slowing down. And when I interview people to come into customer facing roles to take over existing customers, the number one thing that I push in the interview process is I want to know, how are you going to take care of your internal relationships? How are you going to build your internal relationships?
Mm,
Because it makes you better at
mhm.
pushing back on the customer.
Yes.
We say yes to everything the customer wants. We're not going in the direction we need to.
No. Oh, thank you. Thank you. On behalf of all the engineers out in the world, thank you so much for saying all the things we have desperately wanted to hear our whole lives. Um, because like that fundamental point, like our salespeople need to be able to push back on customers. It is not a one-way street. This is not a restaurant. The customer is not always right, and the customer doesn't always know what they need. And I get that. I understand that. But also, salespeople are not technical. They're very few, right, that do live in both, and they typically become sales engineers. But a salesperson needs their engineers, just like an engineer needs a salesperson, because if there's no revenue, there's no job for engineering. There's no money to pay an engineers. So we are very, it's a very symbiotic relationship. And I, I love when salespeople take the time to invest in the relationships with engineers. It's honestly one of the reasons I developed so many of my own skills, because I started at this company. They wanted me to go into sales, but I didn't know anything about the technology, the industry, or anything. So they were like, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna make you our our dedicated engineer for this one new sales guy. You are going to go with him on all of his jobs. You are going to estimate for him. You're going to design for him. He's going to be the account manager, but you guys are going to work together to come up with a solution. And my first few times out on a job site with him, meeting the customers, I would come in guns blazing. I'd ask all the technical questions, and this guy would be like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, like, just reel it in, just for a second." And like talk, like obviously not in front of the customer, but he was so very good at like navigating us and like weaving it back to a normal rapport with a real person. And and, and he would talk to me afterward. He'd be like, "Hey, I love your questions, but here's a better way to ask it, or here's how we can weave it into the conversation in a different way." And it was good feedback for me, because I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know that I needed to ask a scientific question in a very specific, a soft way. I mean, where would I have learned that as an engineer? And what was great is he didn't know a lot about what we did or the tech or, things either. So, and I had learned so much at this point. So we would fill in the gaps for each other. He would do all the building of the relationship and the rapport, and getting them to talk about deeper issues. And I would teach him what kind of technical information he should be fishing for. And we would work together to figure out, okay, what line of questioning actually gets me to where I need to go. And then we would come back to the office and debrief and map out a plan and map out our layout design and present it back to them. And they would say, "Oh my God, thank you. I didn't even know that's what I needed, but this is exactly what I needed." And it was
And
perfect.
the beautiful thing about that is then when you go back to actually make things happen, they can happen because it's already had your perspective on it. And I think what you're describing is where I see, especially in companies where it's early stage, the
Hmm.
roadmap's not solidified, or there's a lot of customization options. There must be someone in that like solution engineering type role that understands, straddles both worlds, that works closely with that salesperson.
Hmm.
The other thing that I think is a good solve, but a lot of companies don't do it, is to delay the incentivization or maybe some of the incentivization of the salesperson until it's live, until we're so till like, things are actually happening and the product's delivered. So I
Yeah.
think just the fact that they can sort of like drop the bomb and fly away, that's where the problem is.
Girl, the stories I could tell you about the salespeople who drop a bomb and walk away. Because that's pretty much like, other than this wonderful salesperson who was also like, he was greener than me, but like we were still green together and we figured it out together. Other than this one relationship, every other salesperson I worked with in this industry was just, they were very hunter, but they still, it was weird. They were hunters and also farmers because they had territories and they had big customers. And though, like, if you think about the Walmarts and the Amazons of the world, like they're going to have a lot of warehouses. So you have to farm those relationships. So they would farm the relationships to a point, but they would, for some reason, still sell things that weren't possible or technology that hadn't been tested yet. And the customer is losing like tens of $1 million an hour because we're down and the tech's not working. And they're worried about their commission check for the next job they've got on the line, not even making the one that's happening go live
Right.
right now.
But most of the time in those situations, engineering pulls off the superhero and then
Yes.
ultimately winds up working.
Yes. It
And they
always
just
does.
keep going,
Yeah. Yeah. And they're
right?
like,
So
it
it's
all
super
worked out.
stressful and it feels like a miserable experience for everybody that's left behind after they've flown away and not see what's happening. But ultimately, like if you were delivering, right, those, then why do they need to stop? And so I think it's not just the nature of the salesperson, but it's the nature of how we are incentivizing them and their commission based, sign the contract, boom, go, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then let everybody else deal with the mess. And they always do. And that's what allows them to keep selling.
God, and I feel like that's the crux of like what burns engineers out the most is this firefighting mentality because there's I won't lie, there's definitely there's part of us that loves playing the hero. We love being able to solve the problem that nobody else could solve and walk off site so confident like, "Oh, I did it." Awesome. Like who doesn't love that feeling? But also that is exhausting. It's exhausting when you are spending, like, the number of times I I was supposed to be on a job site for, like, 3 weeks, and I was there for 6 months because the salesman didn't know what he sold, the customer didn't know what they bought, and my engineers were quite literally undoing forced stops that Bubba from down the street hardwired into the system. And it's chaos. It's absolute chaos. And I won't lie, it's fun for a little while. It's fun to solve problems at the beginning, but then at some point, it becomes just a drain and you lose your will, you lose your fire, and you're exhausted. And now the solutions that you as an engineer are giving aren't even that sustainable because even you're burnt out and you have to cycle people in and out. And that's not sustainable for a company either.
Right. And I think is in those custom worlds where there's a lot of custom dev happening all the time, it just exacerbates the problem. I mean, I've been in organizations where you keep adding one more thing, but then like the foundation starts to just crumble, right? So then you're trying to build, something that is like step 26, but then 3 is breaking because you introduce something that and then it's just you're constantly having outages and fire drills. And I mean, I think engineering and product can continue to be the creative problem solvers, but let's do it within the framework of where we're trying to go in a way that's efficient. And the only way for us to do that is not just say yes to something that the customer without that in.
Yeah. I wanna unpack this concept of incentivization a little bit more because I think it really does tie to the human experience and it taps into our brain in a different way when we're incentivized in not just like, here's like your here, you're gonna get a kudos and a little spot bonus or something, but when there's big money on the line, like there is in sales, there's parts of our brain that kind of shut off the humanity when it comes to very large paychecks. Like everybody's been asked that question, for $1 million, would you do blank? For $10 million, would you do blank? And there's a number for everybody that they would sacrifice something for a dollar value. And there's one of my favorite books, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. He talks a lot about how when we incentivize people with money, there is an aspect of our humanity that kind of gets shut off. And I
Yes.
know sales comes with a very, very big paycheck. So how how would you approach re-incentivizing people? Yes, we obviously incentivize people with money, but how would you do it so that they keep their humanity and care about the customer and still
Yeah.
get the paycheck for it?
So the other thing too, that just so we can also give some additional humanization to the salesperson too, not just like the big paycheck that they want to, they want to keep their job, right?
Yeah,
So
they have
unlike that's
families.
one thing that they have, right? And they maybe have a quota, right? It says you must sell $2 million in the third and fourth quarter, or you're considered to be a poor performer. And look at the sort of the entire like state that we are in terms of the job market, right? People are feeling like they have to do almost anything to keep
Mhm,
their job. So I do want to kind of put that component. It's not just like that they're chasing this huge massive commission check, but it's also completely inherently tied to how they're considered to be performing at their job. And their job can be on the line when they miss numbers, right? So I think that's important to consider. What I'm proposing, and I haven't seen anyone do it successfully yet, especially at the companies where it's much needed, is to maybe there's a smaller portion of a nod in terms of commission, but the larger portion is once things go live, once things work, once the customer like has, gotten to that end state or that outcome that you're looking for. And there should be more sharing of that, right? It shouldn't and I don't know all the details because I don't know how engineering is compensated, and I'm sure it varies from organization to organization. There's a perception that I have that it's heavily weighted on the salesperson that closed the deal.
yeah, very much.
But they can't sell something that they without engineering. If we have nothing to sell, then we can't sell. So I think it's going to require a completely innovative way of thinking about what success is and how we compensate people, how we reward people, how we recognize people.
Yeah. Oh, you just gave me a really interesting idea because so engineering is not typically compensated for go live. Like we don't get bonuses for doing our job. Um we don't even get bonuses for dealing with the fires that we inherit from people, which is unfortunate. So I think this is where like the engineering, those of us that become engineers, like we struggle with the ethics and the morality a lot in the spaces that we're in because we're asked to do so many hard things, but we're the ones with the skills to do it. So we feel the sense of moral obligation to do it. But I I would love, I've never seen a company do this. And if there's a company out there that does this, let a girl know so we can tell all the engineers.
I know.
But like
I
I
want to know where it is.
yeah, I want to know. I would love to see a company that splits the commission with their engineers. I want to see a company that like, yes, the salesperson brings in the revenue, but that revenue means nothing if the technology doesn't work. So, how profit share with your engineers, y'all. Like, they're the ones making it work. Salespeople need to bring it in. And I mean, what's a better way to build the bridge between the two than to share the pot of gold, to share the bonuses with each other? We're both doing hard things. We're both doing like what we're innately good at or inherently good at or have worked really hard to get good at. So why wouldn't we not both be
Right.
celebrated or
And it's still and it that's where there's an issue, right? Because it doesn't matter whether you're just fighting fires and on the verge of burnout or whether you're just humming along, you're going to get the same compensation.
yeah. Yes.
And I don't think we even outside of compensation, the celebration of people, the appreciation of people, that public sort of acknowledgement of what goes on. Again, I see that heavily at the last organization that I was at. It would always be like when something closes or something goes live, they would just kind of call up the salesperson in a company wide Slack or email address, right? And so I made a big point about I need the solution engineer on that. I need engineering and all the people that made it happen recognized as well
Yes.
too. So it's both in terms of like how we celebrate our wins, but
Mhm.
then also how we compensate people. I think that's fundamentally why we're not getting past this.
Yeah. Oh, I think we just solved all the problems.
Yes.
Just we'll give this playbook to everybody.
And everyone just to take a new approach.
Yeah. Please, someone try this out. Let us report back. Let us know. I I really think that could be the key to solving all of the problems. And I also think there's a really important story to be told about how we celebrate people who set each other up for success as well, where like we talk about the wins where we didn't have fires to put out, where it went smoothly and we didn't ask somebody to work outside normal working hours and helicopter in to say to get the most important engineer onto the job site. Like those I want to celebrate the times where things go well. Um because I feel like there's also a layer of we celebrate when a project's been really, really hard and we finally got it done.
Yes. Yeah. I was thinking about it. It's such a relevant example, and it just happened over the past weekend since we just had Mother's Day. But my
No.
boyfriend's daughter works in a high end steakhouse,
Okay.
and she was there, on Mother's Day. And she's the front end to the customer. She's the order taker, right? But she's completely dependent upon the kitchen staff, right, to make the food. And it's a wonderful restaurant in the town that I live in. And that particular night, everything was backed up, right? Just orders weren't coming out. She didn't know what was going on. It was so out of character. People are getting upset. She's like kind of like fielding all of that. And then it became apparent to her later in the evening that the main chef got into like a major fight with the sous chef. So and walked out. Right. So then it just kind of the entire evening just like falls apart. Right. But
Yeah.
that's similar to sort of what I think engineering and people that are tasked with maintaining or inheriting a relationship from an account after something is sold is,
Mhm.
that dance, right? Like, so no matter what you do, right, you can't get ahead in that situation once that happens.
Yeah.
And you're just doing your best to just keep people happy and you wind up giving things away and working ridiculous hours and all of those things. But it was just an example that kind of I just was, just having a conversation about recently that made me think there's so many similarities to that.
Yeah. I do want to talk about one more thing, and that's this idea, not this idea, the fact that you did inherit angry customers.
Yes.
And I want to talk about how you de-escalate or diffuse that kind of tension, because you can only give so much away for free, right? Without acknowledging wrongdoing and having the hard conversations. I assume, right? I think about just personal relationships, like I got to have a hard conversation. We have to address the issue, otherwise we're never going to move past it. So how do you do that from a customer standpoint? Like, do you have those hard conversations? Do you acknowledge, hey, we dropped the ball, and how do those things go?
I think there's the ball can be dropped on either side.
Yeah, totally fair.
It can be the customer too. So I'll give you an example. When I was in consulting, I was managing a lot of public sector business.
Mhm.
So my main buyer from the county, what we were doing a major sort of Salesforce overhaul, and getting them up like with CLM. And government work is also really complex, especially pre AI, because we're going back like 6 years ago. Um, it's sort of an example of what we're dealing with now, right? People who have been doing very like manual process driven work
Mhm.
and have a regular paycheck coming from government are terrified of technology and
Mhm.
optimization,
Mhm.
right? So you have all of this sort of unwillingness to cooperate, this fear of technology. Is it going to get rid of my job? And so I was running into all of these challenges where we would try really hard within our statements of work to get them to have to commit to being at a certain point because we could only do so much dev, if they weren't caught up, if they hadn't reviewed, if they hadn't tested the user stories, all the things that we needed them to do.
Right.
And we were just constantly behind, which was creating this constant cycle of then the engineers were having to work over the weekend every weekend because they hadn't gotten to us what we needed to. We needed to stay within the confines of the work.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that I talked about with this person, and she was very rigid at first. She was also not a fan.
Mhm.
Um, I won her over as well too. But I came up with this plan where I said, instead of us just constantly eating all these additional hours and
Mhm.
working my people to death, I want to build into the contract a resource that actually trains your people, that
Ooh,
gets them up
yeah.
onto the technology. But it was also just like even doing like UAT. They couldn't just follow the process. They weren't getting it done. It was overwhelming to them. So that's what I actually ultimately was able to get her to increase her budget
Mhm.
and then put people in place that could work side by side
Mhm.
and enable the people that were so adverse to all these changes coming to be
Mhm.
successful and up level their people too. Right.
Mhm.
Then when we walk away, we've built this technology. They're not all like, oh, it broke. We need to call you again. Right. So it's about setting them up for success. So that was an example of a creative approach of something I did. I pushed back on the customer and I was sort of I could have just told her I'm going to bill you, 60% more hours, but I said, let's take a different approach where we're both investing in each other and let me put somebody on the ground and help your people learn how to do the testing, help you get some bandwidth, make sure that you guys are ready to inherit the technology and be successful without our help.
Mhm. That's amazing. That's oh, I love it. No notes, 10 out of 10. I love it. And I think there's the important part of, like, acknowledging both sides of it, right? It wasn't, "We're just gonna run away and hide from the problem and just, like, let's not talk
No,
about it. Let's just improve moving forward." I don't think that works. I think it's really important to acknowledge what happened, whether it's in a contentious customer conversation or even, like, interpersonally. You can't move forward until you address the problem itself. So I love that that was something that you're comfortable with doing because I know so many people who aren't, whether they're in sales or just interpersonal relationships. So thank you for that story. That's
yeah,
so valuable.
we could spend so much time talking about why it's important to tell your customer no. I mean,
Oh,
I could
girl.
go off on a tangent there because the more you say yes, the more you're degrading what you have to offer. It's important to be able to challenge your
Mhm,
customer. They don't always know what the exact problem is that they're solving for. They think they know.
mhm,
But that's also your job as to create that like strategic consultative relationship with them so that you can push back, you can ask questions, you can get to the real problem, and then that partnership that you have again internally with engineering, what's the best way to solve for it instead of letting them prescribe what they want you to do.
yeah. Oh, Allie, I completely agree with you, and I really appreciate just, again, hearing us as all and every engineer I know is so grateful to hear that a salesperson says, "You can tell your customer no." Again, you're feeding our souls, so thank you very much, and thank you for all of these incredible stories. Um, is there a great way for people to reach out to you if they wanna learn more about how they can better develop their relationships with their customers, how they can best in their relationships with their internal teams, where they can come work with you? Tell me how we can get in touch with you.
Absolutely. I think the best place to start is LinkedIn. Let's have some conversations. I love any opportunity just to even just connect with folks and just have a conversation about different ways to do this. I'm really going to put some thought into how we could change incentivization programs. I think that's a really cool topic. I'm very sort of fascinated and I think we're onto something there too. So let's keep the conversation going. But again, I just appreciate the time to have such a great conversation with you, Nikki.
Oh my gosh, same Allie. I love you with my whole heart. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Thank you.